Hey guys, it's Cam here. Welcome back to the Build Room. And in this week's episode, we are dealing with a high idle and some other funky behaviors on my R34 Nissan Skyline. So I'm going to be doing an IACV clean and a TPS replacement. So stick around and check it out. Okay, so yeah, as I said in the intro, the R34 has been doing pretty well, but there's a couple of little things that are really annoying me. The first is when this thing's warm, the idle is ridiculous. Sometimes it's fine and it's nice and flat at where it should be, which is just a little under 1,000 RPM, but other times it's sitting more around 12, 13, 1400 RPM. It's really embarrassing, especially if you're trying to drive through a car park at low speed or something like that. It seems like you're driving through Fast and the Furious style, which is not cool. And then the other thing is sometimes when coming off the throttle at low throttle increments, the engine basically dies for a split second as if it's losing electrical impulse in some way, shape or form. It doesn't feel like it's a miss. It's almost like the battery loses its connection for a little bit. Now, I have obviously checked the battery connection, that's all good. But those issues combined with some of the funky behaviors that we've seen from the transmission are starting to make me think it might be the throttle position sensor giving weird readings to the ECU. So yeah, in terms of idle speed, the TPS and the IACV are very tightly linked. The IACV is an expensive thing and the TPS is about 120 bucks. So I figured I'd do my best to clean out the IACV and would just throw a new TPS in. So let's have a look in the bay and we'll get into it. All right, so RB25DE non-turbo, for those of you who are watching this for the first time. Car is pretty much as stock as a rock and I have reverted it back to stock just so that I don't get any hassles from the local constabulary over here. If we look at the intake manifold and the throttle body, this is the TPS sensor with the two plugs on it here. I think the manual versions versus auto, there is a single plug version of this. And then if we have a look around this way, underneath this cover is the TPS, and we've got a air adjustment mixture screw on the top. Luckily, both of those things are pretty easy to access, so we're just gonna get stuck into it. The first thing we're gonna do is to remove the engine cover. There we go. Now, with that out of the way, we can see things a little bit more clearly. Now, the IACV here is an idle air control valve. And what that means is to keep the idle steady and, you know, temperature, elevation and things like that all affect how a car will idle. So an IACV basically lets more air in past the throttle body. So by letting more air in, it's kind of like cracking the throttle a little bit, but it can all be electronically controlled and dynamically adapt to whatever conditions you're in. So yeah, IACV, this is the plug controlling the IACV, and this is sort of the plenum that it sits in to control the airflow. And there's a couple of things here. Firstly, there is some water lines going to this and some vacuum lines, so we're gonna have to remove them. And then there are 4 bolts on the housing itself, and that will all come off. We may remove the IACV module here off as well, but I wanna be able to get in to clean this. So it's not just a case of cleaning the end of the valve, it's also cleaning the housing as well. And then over here with the TPS, this is just held on by 2 screws. So once you've taken the connectors off those, it's very easy to remove from the bay. Now, in terms of replacing the TPS and cleaning out the IACV, as I said, they're very interrelated, these two. So in order to set the idle, you need to make sure that the IACV is clean and the TPS sensor is correctly calibrated. But in order to replace the TPS, you have to dial it in at idle. So it's a bit of a chicken or the egg situation. So what I'm gonna do is start with the IACV, we'll get that off, get it cleaned up, we'll reset the idle as best we can with the existing TPS, and then we'll replace that as well. All right, so we're just gonna pull off all of the coolant hoses and other feed hoses that come into this thing. I think some are vacuum. And as you can see, I've blocked up the ends of those so that if there is gonna be coolant behind them, it's not flowing out while I'm doing this job. Then I just have to remove the loom for the IACV, and then there are 4 10mm bolts holding the unit to the intake. Get those off, pry that away, make sure you don't lose any parts of the gasket down the intake. And this is what the IACV unit and housing looks like. Now, there's a couple of things. Firstly, it doesn't look too dirty in there, which is a little disconcerting. Let me see if I can get to better light. All right, so we're gonna clean this out. I'm gonna use some throttle body cleaner to get all in through there, and then I've got a couple of brushes. I have a brass brush, and I also have a toothbrush, or just a, you know, you can use a nylon brush. something like that. I use a toothbrush because it's just a little bit smaller, easy to get into places. You just need to be really careful here. You've got basically a seat in here that's going to allow, as this valve body retracts, air to cross over from one chamber to another. So you want to clean everything up, but you don't want to damage the seat or the valve unit itself. So I'm going to pop it out. We'll just take these two screws out. Remove the valve. There we go. All right, so you can see where this sits inside the housing. And then you've got this little pin that'll move up and down in there, and it'll allow air through. So it'll get sucked in through these holes and then move across the chamber into there. I think that's how it works. So yeah, we're gonna clean all this down and then slide it back in. But I'm really only gonna use the nylon brush on all of this stuff and around the seat. And then anywhere else that I really need to clean stuff out, I might go with the brass, especially around the outside of the housing and stuff like that where it doesn't really matter, and certainly cleaning off the rust from these areas here. And we'll just start with the housing. And I'm just gonna keep brushing through this. We'll come back and then we'll have a look at it clean and then reassemble it. All right, so we're pretty clean there. Nice clean seat in there for that transfer tube. I want to say the orifice on this side is clean. Not that you can see that very well. These components are clean. To be honest, none of this was really that dirty. If you've got a massive problem with your IACV where it's sticking, it's probably gonna look dirtier than this. But like I said, we've got it out, let's clean it up. All right, so making sure that everything is still clean, we haven't picked up any dirt, we're gonna reassemble the valve body. It should slide in relatively easily. There we go, just drops down. Make sure we get the spring in place, that should be centered. And then slide the unit back together. Now we slide it in, get it on the right orientation, which I think is this way. And just hold this together as you slide it in so that you don't end up having that spring unseat. So one screw, the second screw. One last spray out. All right, and as far as I'm concerned, we'll throw that back on the car. I'm pretty sure this face is up. If it's not, we'll soon find out and I'll have to just swap it over. Awesome. That's not gonna fit. All right, so that's gonna be a problem. This is the one that came off and this is the one that I was given in my pack. Luckily this one, as you can see, I haven't killed it too much. So I should be able just to put some sealer on that and reuse it, and I'll probably replace it down the line once I can be sure I've got all this sorted out. So yeah, I'm just gonna use a little bit of Permatex, Hylamar sort of a thing on this, and we'll throw it back together. It's tight. Okay. And now we need to warm this thing up, so we'll see if it starts and holds an idle. All right, so that's idling at about 1100 RPM at the moment, which is way too high, but at least it's stable. So I'm gonna let it warm up to temp, which is, halfway on the gauge, and then we'll come back and we'll reset the idle. All right, so we're warmed up. The temp gauge is about halfway in the car. We're idling at about 1050, which is still probably a little bit higher than we want it. So we're gonna do the proper procedure now to set that idle. And the idle is set through this screw here on top of the manifold. But you've also got a whole bunch of electronics that are trying to keep that idle stable, if you remember, right? So that's the whole point of the IACV. So in order to disable those so that we're just getting a base idle, we have to disconnect that brown plug on the TPS, just like that. And then when we start it up, we'll be looking to get an idle that's around 600 RPM. 600 to 650 is good. And then turn it off, plug it all back in, and away we go. So clockwise to take it down. All right, that's not great. That idle screw is down as much as it will go, and we're still sitting at about 1100 RPM at the moment, so that is no bueno. We definitely want a baseline load lower than that. So what is likely here is that there is a leak somewhere else in the intake system, or for instance, the IACV could potentially be stuck open, or the backup air valve could be toast as well. So yeah, I'm gonna have to do some more digging here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a bolt check on all of these bolts, make sure that they are tight. I'm also going to make sure that this cable has slack on it, which it seems to, like it's got slack there. I mean, there is the potential that someone has adjusted this with a stop screw and is cracking the intake open too much. But yeah, I want to make sure all those bolts are tight first. I think there might be an auxiliary air valve somewhere around here as well, like on the bottom of the manifold. I can't remember. The other thing I should be checking here really is the base timing on it. But I think you need the console software for that and a cable, and I don't have that at the moment. So I'm just gonna do the best I can. So look, I think we've got it to a point where it's, you know, reasonable to swap out the TPS and see how much that helps us. I mean, with it disconnected, it shouldn't be doing anything. I think that gray plug is just for the auto trans, but if we get the TPS dialed in properly, it might get the idle air control valve working a little bit harder to offset any leaks that we have. It still means we would have a base leak and that the IRC would be compensating for it, but I don't want to go down a rabbit hole with this yet. I just want to see if potentially the TPS is what's causing the throttle cutout when I'm in low throttle. So yeah, I really want to get that out and be able to take this thing for a drive, and then we can chase vacuum leaks a bit later. Well, those are a little loose. Hard to tell if it would have been a leak or not. Let's fire that up again. Oh wow. All right, so that's a pretty dramatic improvement. That's dropped to about 900 at the moment. So I think that's actually where it's supposed to sit. So I'm gonna drop that connector off again and see where we are without the IACV letting in more or less air. All right, again, that was lower, so it's definitely improved, but it's not perfect. So there's a couple of things. I think what I want to do is change the TPS now, because I really want to get that sorted out. And then maybe in the future, not today, but I'll get a new gasket for the IACV, and I'll also get a new gasket for this piece here and for that bottom there, because those were actually quite loose at the back. So I'd say I had a vacuum leak at the back. So yeah, let's get stuck into the TPS now. And on the TPS, we've just got two Phillips head screws, top and bottom, and these two plugs to remove. Just be careful with these. They do corrode and then they round out. So make sure you just put a lot of pressure on them with a decent screwdriver and crack them first. I'm gonna take the IACV loom out as well, just to give me a bit of room to work. Oh yeah, there we go. That's one out. Oh. It's two out. One and 2 looms. And we're out. Easy as. Just got a little mechanism inside that rotates when the throttle actuator is moving on the other side. All right, and if we look at the inside of that, I don't know, receptacle, whatever you want to call it, there's a metal bar there, and that bar is supposed to catch that arm there. So the way you need to do it is you put it in on a 45-degree angle, so you can be sure the arm gets picked up in the right area, and then you rotate it and you get a screw into it. All right, and with that done up and in place, we've got a little bit of adjustment from side to side that we can calibrate this with. And the way we calibrate it is by measuring the voltage that's coming out of the TPS plug. This is the one that we're going to measure the voltage on to see that this is correctly calibrated. And the way I'm going to do that, it's a bit tricky, but with it plugged in, we have to be able to test the voltage coming out of the center pin on this plug. So it's a 3-pin plug. And so yeah, the center plug here is the one we want to check. So what I'm going to do is, these are like a waterproof plug, but if you jam like a paper clip or something down into that past the rubber, you should get an electrical connection, and then you can put a multimeter onto that. So let's try that now. While we're here, I'll also reconnect the IACV before I forget about it. All right, I think that might be okay. Let's try it out. All right, so we've got the paper clip pushed into the back there. We've got our multimeter and it's grounded just out to the strut tower now. And what I should be able to do is, with those bolts loose, we're looking to see the initial reading, and we are looking to get this to 0.5 volts, plus or minus 0.05 volts. All right, so we've got 0.75, and if we just rotate this, we'll get it close. .56, 0.53, 0.52, 0.50, 0.49, a little bit less. Okay, let's try there. Just going to tighten up, cinch off this top nut. Check it again. It's 0.51. I'll just tighten up the bottom. Okay, one last check. 0.51, so I'm happy with that. That is well within. So we were looking for a number which was 0.45 to 0.55, and we have 0.51. Very close to bang on. So let's fire it up and see. I'll leave the pin in there for now, just in case something else needs adjusting. Oh yeah. All right. Okay, that is sitting at about 750 to 800 RPM at the moment. So I'm stoked with that. That's awesome. But the big test here is going to be to close all this up and take it out for a test drive. So I will be back soon. All right, so we're back. I just took this thing for a fairly long drive because the bottom line is, since making those changes, this drives like a completely different car. I'm absolutely stoked, so much so that I wrote a list so I could tell you guys all the changes that have happened here. So firstly, it idles lower. So this used to, when warm, idle around 15 to 1800, way too high. And now it's under 1,000. I think I'd probably say it's about 900. Maybe not as low as I'd like it, but it's certainly much better than it was. So the side effects to that are, it is quieter, both at idle and when driving, because it's not, you know, with 1800 RPM as its lowest point, quite often it was always pushing against the converter in 4th gear. So much quieter. I'm hoping it'll also mean better fuel economy, but I'm yet to see that. There's no creep. So this thing used to push forward at the lights and in car parks, and you would always be dragging the brakes to keep it in line. No creep whatsoever anymore. It's spot on. It brakes better because, again, it's not pushing against the converter non-stop. Even simple stuff like the kick for the AC when the compressor kicks in is much smoother and quieter now. because it's not trying to kick on and all of a sudden jump from 0 RPM to 1800. So if you're sitting at the lights and your aircon's going in and out, it's no longer a bang and an annoyance, it's just smooth like it should be. What else? No gear clunk. So when you're changing from park into drive or drive into reverse, you're not getting that loud thunk and everyone looking at you in the shopping center and stuff like that. So much better, cleaner, nicer car to drive at the moment. Then we get on to the TPS changes. So I would say that the TPS sensor was definitely on the way out. It probably had very little movement in its impedance and therefore the output voltage between, say, idle and probably, 3/4 throttle. So really there wasn't a lot there, to the point where I don't think it was getting off the idle map when I was accelerating. So it accelerates much harder now. It actually feels like it should. It's not a rocket ship, it's not the turbo model, but with whatever they were, 150 kilowatts or so, it now drives like that kind of car. There's no flare in the shift. So obviously we went to a lot of trouble to flush the transmission and stuff like that, and that improved the flaring greatly, but there's still a little bit there. Now it's gone. Obviously because it knows whether I'm accelerating or decelerating, and it must be able to lock up quicker or harder when it knows where my foot is. The shifts are also appropriate, so now it holds gears much better, and as soon as I start to let off to cruise, it's shifting up gears, and then when I get on the gas again to overtake, downshifting as it should. And then finally, no cutout. So I just took this for a fairly long drive, did not have that light sort of 10 to 20% throttle cutout at all. So I'm pretty sure that's solved as well. So overall, massive win for the car. I am absolutely super stoked. I really want this to be my daily driver for a little while, and it was bumming me out how badly it drove. Like, it wasn't horrible, but it just wasn't refined. And sometimes, you convince yourself, well, a 90s car, it's just not going to be anything like a 2013 or 2020 or whatever newer model car, and I'm just going to have to live with it. And I was kind of in that space, but it was really bumming me out. Now, this is actually really, really nice to drive. The only thing that's bothering me now is with the car quieter and with nothing else going on, I can hear the diff whine a lot louder. So we are going to be swapping that LSD into the back of this thing and see if we can get rid of that diff whine once and for all. And then the car will be pretty much perfect as a daily. Definitely no need to do the manual transmission swap, which might bum you guys out. And look, if you do want to see a manual trans swap, let me know. I could probably be convinced if there was enough comments of people looking to do it. But I think at the end of the day, I'd rather work on some of the other projects first. I really want to get back to the Celica stuff. And then the next time we come back to this might be for an engine swap, for instance. And we will throw a manual transmission in along with that engine. So anyway, if you're having problems with your RB25, I hope this episode will help you out. That is going to be it for today. I'm going to do the standard stuff. I'll link to the full Violet Crumble Celica series up here and some other decent content down here. Other than that, I just want to say thanks for watching. I'll see you next time on The Build Room. Bye for now.